Politics without the soap opera, with unfiltered constitutional conservative truth. The Conservative Review with Daniel Horowitz.
And welcome back, fellow patriots, to the one and only Conservative Review podcast, the only source of independent conservative news and views here on Blaze Media Network. And it is the first day in November. Finally, some semblance of fall here. Very chilly here at our Northern Command Center. It was just crazy storms last night. So I apologize if you hear some tree cutters in the background because a lot of people had debris fall in their backyards. But we are at the end of the week. It is Friday. And I could tell you guys, I have so much for you. Follow me at RM Conservative as always. You see on my Twitter account, tons of crazy jailbreak stories, immigration stories, economic news. I mean, every day, my thesis is being proven correct of the fact that we have record low unemployment, yet very lethargic growth. Why? Number one, the debt. Number two, venture socialism. We have jobs doing very inefficient things, cafe standards, ethanol mandate. The Trump administration is caving on those things. We might have a piece out later today or Monday on that. But that leads me to the broader point. And that is, what have you learned this week from conservative media? I mean, really, what have you learned? We've had a very productive week here, but in general, so it's two things. It's impeachment and the Democrat primary. What is it you could affect the outcome of either of those two things? I mean, the Democrat primary, we're not going to affect it, nor should we care to. They are who they are. They're extremely radical. Our job is to have a consistent conservative vision that is good for everyone on the issues of our time: crime, sovereignty, security. What's a conservative foreign policy? Obviously, tons of economic stuff that we could win on. We're going to have a special guest on today, talk a little bit about populism. But I would argue that true free market policies, when explained right and done right, are populist. Nothing says populist, and I'm saying that sarcastically, like forcing us to put in crappy ethanol into our engine and enrich 20 farming lobbyists in Iowa. The cafe standards, having paper thin cars that cost $5,000 to $7,000 more per car. You know, everything is going down in price, not cars. That's a reason why Trump was going to roll back Obama's policies. Now he's caved on that. That was breaking last night. And we see this across the government. While there are a lot of limitations on the president, things that you need Congress to pass, and Democrats control the House, and let's face it, Democrats really control the Senate as well, we have the whole judicial problem. But then there are so many things that, believe it or not, were put into place by Obama or other administrations administratively. And simply by having the right personnel and the right executive policies, there is so much we could accomplish. 3, 5, 7 good conservative figures could influence the outcome of so many of these issues, as opposed to impeachment, as opposed to the Democrat primary. Yet every time where we need men on the field, and if we had men on the field directing the president, hey, make the play, make the pass, there's an open man down the field, there's no one there. And in fact, when he's about to toss an interception, when we need people to yell in his ear, the guns run silent. Certainly, most of you have seen this vividly with our coverage here of Jailbreak. The president intuitively did not want it. He hated it. His whole career stood as a testament against it. And up until the end, he didn't want it. And now we know he regrets it. But everyone's guns lied silent. And we got bad policy. I was asked at a speaking engagement in Manhattan 2 nights ago, a Republican women's club there, why is it that we got the worst immigration policies or worst outcomes at the border, at least for about a 10, 12-month period, under Trump? How does that happen? Well, I'll tell you how it happens. Because Trump winning in 2016 was not a touchdown. It was recovering possession of the ball. But you got to make the plays and you got to win. Conversely, you could still lose by fumbling the ball, tossing an interception. Because of a mixture of his own erratic personality, he has good instincts. 9 out of 10 times intuitively he agrees with us, but he is kind of erratic. And he does have crappy people around him, both in the White House and in the 12 or so departments and agencies under that, if you don't steer him in the right way, they will convince him that this is the best he can do, this is all he can do, and this is what we're going to get. This is at its core why we are here. I don't have too many people I could talk to that agree with me on this. I have very few individuals that are actually focused, that you could actually learn something from. One of them is Ryan Gerdusky. Now, we're going to put up on the screen here his Twitter name. And the reason why I say his Twitter, because if you simply just follow his Twitter account, you will learn a tremendous, tremendous amount from that Twitter account. Social media is just god awful. It really is. There are so many bad people on it. Or as always, I explain how it's just dumbed down the minds of Americans, where people think in sound bites, not in terms of long form discussion. But one of the positive things of social media is there's about 4 or 5 people over the past year or two that I've met. First just online, and then we started speaking, and tremendous amount of good policy work, good political work has been born out of those relationships. Some people I have to keep anonymous, but one of those people is Ryan. And again, you gotta subscribe to his account, Ryan Gerdusky. It's very simple. It will be up here on the screen. You will learn a tremendous amount of information. But in addition, he has a newsletter, a populist nationalist newsletter. Now, one day we'll have to discuss the semantics of the terminology there. I'm a traditional conservative. I think for the most part, we agree on most, if not everything. It's a matter of terminology here on what is conservatism. But I think we both recognize that what we're doing is not working. The Republican Party is broken. The conservative movement is broken. And we're not notching up wins, but it doesn't have to be this way. One of the things that Ryan has been covering that I think answers this question that I was asked, why is it that we've failed so miserably on the border under President Trump, is the personnel issues at DHS. If you think about it, we all understand that, okay, the first couple months, it's going to be chaotic. You got to drain the swamp. But we are 3 years into this administration, and we've had Kelly, Nielsen, and McAleenan as DHS and acting DHS secretaries. I mean, people that are swinging for the other side. It's taken a while, but we have better people at an agency level at, ICE, certainly the best at USCIS, Ken Cuccinelli. CBP acting commissioner is Mark Morgan. But we need the big cheese. And if nothing is done, and this might even come out before the show is published, Chad Wolf, one of the undersecretaries of policy and strategy, is going to be picked. A guy who totally is swinging for the other side, who has put in other personnel who are Democrats, liberals, open borders people, part of the swamp, the globalist crowd. And yet, 3 years into this, Trump is on the cusp of nominating this guy. Ryan has been at the forefront of the coverage on this, but not just covering it, but also giving a sense of the choices. It doesn't have to be this way. Before I talk too long, let's bring on our guest, Ryan Gerdusky, who's going to explain all of the details, all of the inside information you're not going to get anywhere else. Hey, Ryan, thanks for joining me on such short notice.
Thank you so much, Daniel. How are you?
We are doing all right here. And look, I should have thought of this a while ago. I planned on doing a show on this, and I figured, why don't I just bring you on? You got all the goods. Could you just explain the background? I mean, answer the question. We know Trump wants Cuccinelli. We know on immigration, maybe with a couple of exceptions, he intuitively agrees with us. Why are we still at the cusp of going backwards, appointing an open borders guy?
Well, I think the problem is this has been Trump's issue since he became president, is who he hires and who he brings on. I think that when the history books are written on this administration, the day that he chose Reince Priebus as his chief of staff was the beginning really of the end of the Trump administration fundamentally, because Reince flooded the administration with people. I got word today that there was a new person at DHS who I know for a fact was at the RNC and voted for John Kasich in the general election. Wrote in John Kasich in the general, and now he works for the DHS. This has been systematic for a very, very long time. One person told me that we couldn't possibly have somebody like Chris Kobach Ken Cuccinelli as the head of DHS because he, quote, needs a job after his job at DHS is over. So this is the mindset of the swamp. And unfortunately, when the president walked into the administration, I'm going to take one very large step back to the beginning. Sure. The president originally wanted wanted Chris Kobach for the job. He gave Chris the okay that he had the position. And Reince Priebus turned to Steve Bannon, according to two sources of mine who were in the room. Reince Priebus turned to Steve Bannon and said to him, I will have a new DHS secretary picked within 10 days. And Reince and McConnell absolutely were working against Chris Kobach from the very beginning. And Reince and McConnell then got him to nominate General Kelly. In the quick aftermath, you would think that one of the allies for Chris Kobach, an immigration hawk, would have been Stephen Miller. Stephen Miller was working and conspiring against Chris Kobach as well, because the essential problem with Stephen Miller, and I've talked about this, I've been basically one of, I guess, only 2 or 3 people on the right to talk about this. Stephen Miller's essential goal is to make sure Stephen Miller is the only immigration hawk near Donald Trump. It is a brand for him. It is like Gap or Levi's or anything else. Stephen Miller is the MAGA brand, and when there's 7 or 8 of him, he is becomes non-essential.
Whoa! Slow it down. That's big news to a lot of people. I'm just saying, even this audience, some people might have been aware of that, but most people think, based on the left-wing news coverage, so they treat Stephen as I mean, he is the devil. This is the 2 Minutes hate in 1984, the Rube Goldberg figure. He's behind every pro-sovereignty initiative in this administration. So naturally, most people, when they look at politics, they view everything as right and left, more or less. Okay, this guy's to the right, this guy's to the left. But as you noted, politics is more complicated than that. And fundamentally, I don't think Stephen has changed. We used to talk for a long time back in the days when he served under Senator Sessions, and he believes in what we believe in. But when you get to a high position, at some point it becomes more about yourself. This is a very big problem in government in general. It's not unique to him. So you're saying that while he still could be a force for good, and sometimes is, but at the same time, what's the biggest thing we need? We need more like him. We need, and
I explain. I don't want to sit there and say that he is some kind of squish, and he's he's not. He is an immigration hardliner, but he has an ego to him, and that ego involves him and whoever he's dating at the time, because he's had several girlfriends in the administration, sabotaging anybody who's applied for high position jobs inside the administration who are also immigration hawks. The minute Bannon was going down in the administration, Miller immediately switched sides and was Ivanka's best friend and made sure that he was not among the Bannon purge. Miller is a survivor. So you have Kelly. Kelly gets off. Let's move to replaces Reince rather. And Trump then goes, I would like to appoint Chris Kobach again. And to which Kelly, who was frequently gave into fits and literally tantrums, is how it was described to me, says, no, you need to put in Nielsen. Nielsen at the time was his chief of staff. Nielsen, to my associates who were at DHS at the very beginning of the administration, Nielsen was absolutely adamant. Her and her chief of staff at the time, Chad Wolf, were absolutely adamant that we are never building this wall. Chad Wolf, at the very beginning, during Nielsen's administration, during Nielsen's time at DHS, was in charge of the zero tolerance policy. Chad Wolf, according to 2 different sources at DHS who were there when it happened, said that Chad Wolf absolutely sabotaged the zero tolerance policy to make sure it could not work efficiently. And it would have to, remember, if you look at the surge across the border, I know I'm going kind of a lot of places. If you look at the surge across the border, the only time the surge stopped before the recent few months was during the beginning of the zero tolerance policy. It wasn't that the policy was ineffective, it was administered terribly bad, and that was because of Chad Wolf. Nielsen, Trump hated Nielsen. He berated her constantly. During one famous fit, he sat there and said, everyone hates you. Lou Dobbs hates you. Ann Coulter hates you. He absolutely did not like Kirstjen Nielsen. They had a terrible working relationship. But despite what you mentioned Stephen Miller in the media has this portrayal of Stephen Miller as the devil. This is the reputation Stephen Miller likes to put himself out there. This is not by accident. Stephen 100% manipulates the media because most people in the media don't know anything about immigration, or if they do, they're a liberal in immigration. So it's perfect. It's a perfect ploy. Stephen, during the very beginning of his time in the administration, when Nielsen's there, when Kelly is there, immediately starts distancing all of the immigration groups, Numbers USA, FAIR. They get fewer and fewer contacts and fewer meetings inside the White House. Miller absolutely pushes everyone who's a hawk away. What was another thing Miller did that was so Miller's been pushing people away.
Well, Cisna, I think the big one is the USCIS director. So
I'll tell you all about Lee Francis Cisna, what happened with that. Lee Francis Cisna, brilliant guy, an immigration, a good guy in immigration, understands the issue, a policy person. There were weekly phone calls. This is where the whole Cisna Miller thing came through. So let me go back a step. Nielsen's in charge. They have a very contentious relationship, but Miller and Nielsen are able to work with one another, right? Despite what the media has sat there and portrayed, they had a decent working relationship with one another. They devised a plan. Now, this is when the surge is beginning to happen. Everything's been falling apart. Chad Wolf has sabotaged the zero tolerance policy. Nielsen and Miller had devised a plan. Hey, let's create an immigration czar. Somebody who essentially has no power but could be the fall guy. And that's when the names Chris Kobach, Ken Cuccinelli, and Thomas Homan come up. Yeah. All three go for meetings. All three were not welcoming to the immigration czar position because there was no power to it. At the same exact time, or roughly a little bit before that, Stephen had a falling out with Lee Francis Cisna. This was over a phone call. So there was a weekly phone call in the administration within immigration stuff. And Lee was a part of it. There were dozens of people a part of it. And when Stephen gets on the call to talk, everyone has to stop talking so Stephen can sit there and rant. And there are times that Stephen will rant for 20 or 30 minutes, just berating people. He has literally, as everyone has told me, he has no friends in the administration for a reason, where he will rant at people. Anyway, he was berating an understaff or calling him a never-Trumper or an accusation of that he was working against the president, which there are dozens of people in DHS, so pick one. But apparently it was the point that it was semi-abusive. And Lee Francis, according to sources on the call, cut him off while he was speaking and said, "That's enough, Stephen." And Stephen screamed back, "You will not silence me," something to that effect. And it became a zoo on the phone call. The call dropped. And after that, Lee Francis was a made man. They was going to get Lee out of the administration for embarrassing him.
So freeze frame, because that explains to a lot of people who are very confused at the time, you know, and we were trying to get at all these clowns, and we had a terrible DHS secretary, plus all the agencies, and the only good guy was the USCIS director, Lee Francis Cisna, who even Ken Cuccinelli, who got his position because of Francis getting kicked out, will tell you Lee was a good guy. So like, hey, you know, what gives, how is the best guy kicked out? So you're saying it was all because of personality clashes.
All personality. And you can tell that Ken appreciated the work that Lee Francis did because Ken Cuccinelli has kept most of his staff and pushed forward a lot of his policies that he started. It's not like he sat there and said, "Oh, look what's going on over here." Ken has, well, I'll go back to Ken in a second. So anyway, so Nielsen's there. They're trying to create this position. Nielsen gets fired. Two sources told me it is not because of Stephen Miller that she got fired, although he took credit for it, but he takes credit for everything, so who knows if that's true or not. But that's what was widely reported in the media. I don't necessarily believe it. And at the time, I don't know if you remember this story, Daniel. Do you remember when the Angel Moms were trying to meet with Trump and they couldn't get a meeting with him?
It was at the time, you know when it was, Ryan, we remember it. It was in February when we had the government shutdown. And he could have passed another clean CR and just did nothing. And then the border numbers would have come out and he would have had tremendous momentum because back then they were saying there isn't even a problem. Instead, he signed a bill that to this day contains a provision inviting all the illegal aliens to come and traffic their kids into this country, and we reunite them at taxpayer expense, and in return, they get amnesty.
You remember the Joe moms were trying to get a meeting with Trump to tell him not to sign this bill.
Yep.
And he was basically denied by three major people, Mercedes Schlapp, Kellyanne Conway, and the now acting chief of staff, Mick Mulvaney. Well, at the time, I was reporting on this. I was the only reporter to report on this. It went viral. And Stephen Miller started calling his girlfriend at the time, one of his girlfriends at the time, I think, maybe his current one, started calling, because they do all his PR for him, started calling different conservative writers saying, oh, no, don't listen to Gordowski's reporting. It was Lee Francis Cisna who was stopping him. He was conspiring against Lee, even though Lee Francis is not the scheduler. Lee Francis has no control whatsoever over who meets with the president. It was a lie. They were just lying because
he wouldn't. The USCIS director doesn't have any. That's not a White House guy.
He has as much control as I do over the president's schedule. So he just works to sabotage Lee Francis. Lee Francis, he gets him out, and it is a perfect opening for Ken Cuccinelli, who he was thinking about putting in for immigration czar, although there was a problem that there was no power. And if you remember what I said about Homan, although Trump announced Homan publicly that he was going to take the job, though he never agreed to it, Homan and Kobach also had meetings, as well as Ken, for immigration czar. Stephen Miller was the one who leaked to the New York Times Kobach's list of demands, purposely to embarrass him and to make sure he couldn't get the job. Because Stephen has a long hatred of Chris Kobach. It's I don't know if it's a jealousy thing that Chris is a lawyer and Stephen's not. Stephen always mentions for some reason that he should have been a lawyer. I don't know what it is, but Stephen has personal vendettas about people who are better, or not better, but as smart or smarter than him on policy when it comes to immigration. That being said, so Ken goes to DHS. McAleenan comes up. Nielsen gets fired. It's April of this year. Nielsen is fired. There's a vacancy. And the question is, how do we change the rules to get another DHS, acting DHS secretary under the Vacancies Act, because he didn't really want a swish. He wanted a hardliner. Stephen goes to bat immediately for McAleenan, even though he's warned at the time McAleenan has a terrible record on immigration. He is also the person, since becoming acting DHS secretary, who was leaking ICE raids to the Washington Post, allegedly.
Nick Myroff is his private secretary.
Yes, exactly. So he's absolutely horrible. Stephen is warned from the get-go. Now, if you look at the publications from the time, what the media was reporting was that Stephen was, quote unquote, in charge of Trump's immigration policy. He certainly had heavy influence at hiring at that time. So Trump wants a hawk. He wants somebody who's actually going to do something. They change all the rules and they put in McAleenan. McAleenan is not a conservative by any stretch of the imagination. He's a career person inside DHS. He would have been as comfortable in the Hillary Clinton administration, probably more comfortable in the Hillary Clinton administration than in a Trump administration. He is warned at the time, do you know this person's record is this bad? And Stephen says, and I quote from the two sources who were in the room with him, quote, I can control him. Oh, sorry. No, I take it back. I have a good working relationship with him. I can control him.
So I want to freeze frame. You threw in a lot of information, and I want everyone to understand. Ryan was a former political reporter for One America's News Network. He's gone independent now. And this is part of the problem, that we have a lot of commentators. We have a lot of opinion makers. We have writers. We have, people like myself. But we don't have a lot of reporters with good sources that are trying to find out angles that are important to our side. There's plenty of reporters around that are batting for the other side, or, the run-of-the-mill establishment Republicans, Fox News, which is, a whole story in itself. So if you've noticed, he has a lot of sources, and a lot of people are kind of hot dogs, and they say, oh, I'm hearing this. It doesn't turn out to be true. Almost everything I've seen from him came out to be true pretty spectacularly and pretty quickly. So, because I want to make it clear. I'm just saying, to our audience, I know you listen sometimes. You're a listener, but not always. And, we don't usually get into gossip too much. We don't have too much of this, but people want me to name names. And that's why we brought you on to name some of these names. And I think you've already answered one question. How the heck is it that in the third year, okay, you say maybe we have some swamp guys at HUD. Maybe we still have some bad guys at EPA. But how is it that DHS, which was this was the centerpiece of Trump's campaign promise on immigration, and he's already had so many problems. How is it we still have problems with personnel? So part of it is, inherently there's an inveterate swamp. But what you've answered is that Stephen Miller, who's the point man on the White House, it's not that he's suddenly become a liberal, but he has this bizarre personality flaw where by definition, he thrives better if they're not a hawk, if they're more someone that
it makes him essential to not only the president, but to the movement as well. He is essential to both of them.
But he doesn't, freeze frame there. I want you to answer this question then.
I could, by the way, so don't make it that hard.
I could attest, I have not spoken to him, and I don't like trashing people. I mean, the last time we've spoken, which was 3 years ago, we always had a good working relationship, certainly when he was in the Senate. And I wish I congratulated him the night after he won. I think he answered thank you. And that's it. We have not spoken since then. Now, I'm just one person. I think I'm a pretty important voice on the right on immigration, but there's other people. From what I've heard, Ryan, that he hasn't spoken to almost anyone.
No, you're not alone at all. Every immigration hawk who was there when he was a low-level staffer at Sessions' office has been cut out of his world, has had hard times getting meetings with the president. People who went to bat for the president when he was just a billionaire coming down an escalator can't get meetings inside the administration like they used to, like they did when they was a candidate. And meanwhile, they've gone groveling to, MSNBC or an NBC or a CBS or ABC. They've been giving them exclusives, or the New York Times or the Washington Post, or you name it. It is insane. And he's obviously not the only person responsible. As I said before, Reince Priebus, Johnny DeStefano, and now Sean Ducey flooded the administration with Never-Trumpers at the Office of Personnel. There are a lot of bad people. DeStefano especially did untold amount of damage to this president. Reince Priebus did an untold amount of damage. Reince Priebus was the one who brought on Madeline, who was spying on the president and trashing his daughters, and she was his assistant.
And in the Office of Personnel, we'll get to Ducey in a minute, because I want to, we're running out of time. I want to take it more to the here and now.
Right.
But
let me right to currently. So
sure.
Anyway, so McLean is there. McLean does a horrible job. McLean chooses to leave. He was not fired from everything I've heard. And then the fight unfolds of who's going to replace McLean. And this is now. Trump immediately wants Cuccinelli because he's the only one who has delivered. As we mentioned before, Cuccinelli took over for Lee Francis Cisna. And what Cuccinelli has, what Lee Francis did not have, is immense amount of access to the president. So he's been able to prioritize and to stop a lot of the Never-Trumpers inside the administration, especially in which office is it? I'm blanking out. Paul Ray. Paul Ray is the man who's been stopping a lot of things, and I can't remember which office he's in. But anyway, but he has had the access and the ability to get the president's mind, focus on getting through policy initiatives, things that Lee Francis started. Cuccinelli has continued and gotten enacted, and regulatory reforms, and it's been very, very, very successful. So the fight goes on. He wants Cuccinelli. Cuccinelli is his guy on everything. He's the one who's been able to deliver. But there's a problem with the Vacancies Act. According to the rules of who can fill in for a person who's been acting, you need to appoint somebody. Well, McConnell has had a long hatred of Ken Cuccinelli since McConnell hates most conservatives, but he hates Ken Cuccinelli because Cuccinelli supported a primary challenge to McConnell. It's a long, long blood feud. And basically, McConnell is telling everyone there is no way in hell he's getting through my Senate confirmation.
And to be fair, Ryan, as much as it's a bitter pill to swallow, it is true. He would probably get 5 votes because the Senate sucks. And precisely
but he wouldn't get it.
I mean, I guess Trump could probably, if he put his weight behind him, guys would fall in line. But there are, for the very reasons you and I like him, That's why these guys hate him, because they're part of the problem.
So it would be a very difficult thing to do, and it would be very, very hard, and enters Chad Wolf. Chad Wolf, if you can look at my tweet from April 2019, when Nielsen was still there, I tweeted a list of like 9 people who were the essential problem people inside DHS. McAleenan was on that list, and Chad Wolf was on that list.
And folks, we're going to put up that list here on the screen so you could see it here.
Yeah, no, and that's why I said April. I said both those names are problems. Chad Wolf has absolutely sabotaged the president. He was a former lobbyist for high-tech workers. He's been terrible, but he had 3 essential allies. McConnell, because he's not Ken Cuccinelli. Miller, for everything we've talked about with Miller's ego problems, and Sean Ducey. Sean Ducey is the head of personnel. He's in charge of the hiring process of the administration. Sean Ducey is the swamp. I mean, total swamp creature like no one's business. And Sean Ducey, essentially that's what he is. And the 3 100% conspired against Ken Cuccinelli, worked around the clock. Trump wanted to figure out a way to have Ken Cuccinelli somehow be put in this position. And they said, no, Chad Wolf, Chad Wolf, Chad Wolf, Chad Wolf. So it's very much looking like Chad. Like they said to him, basically, I think the words were, you have no choice, which Trump hated and exploded.
So I want to walk that back just a little bit. So what you're getting at is, and they're brilliant at doing this, whether it's in the Senate or the White House. This is a trick from the establishment Republicans for years. They have these quasi-policy legal arguments that are designed to steer the outcome in one direction. So in this case, aside from the Vacancies Act, which has certain restrictions, there is more of an impediment to appointing anyone you want as acting without Senate confirmation to DHS secretary because of the Homeland Security bill. So it has kind of a rigid structure. And you need someone who has been at DHS for 90 days above like GS 15 and above. But that's a heck of a lot of people, by the way. So what they say is that, hey, like you look at the undersecretaries and there's only a few of them, and Chad Wolf is an undersecretary, so it's got to be him. But really, so a couple of things here I want to make clear. You and I love Ken Cuccinelli, but I think we got to be careful here, and I think Ken himself would agree with us that we shouldn't stop hitting Senate Republicans for their malfeasance on that. But in order to stop Chad Wolf, we have to be more realistic and open up to other alternatives. So that's what I want you to explain to us.
Right, okay, so I tweeted a list of several people who could be considered possible. Remember, Chad Wolf is not Senate confirmed yet. So Chad Wolf has to get Senate confirmed to a position he was appointed to before he can get put in this position. They can pass Chad Wolf, but they have not yet, but they absolutely can. There's a lot of people. It doesn't have to be from DHS either. If you're just appointing a temporary position to fill the void for McAleenan, Trump has a lot of different people he could appoint. He could get Zadrozny is his name. John
Zadrozny. He works with.
He's supposed to be for a Senate confirmed position. Get him confirmed by the Senate. He's totally qualified for his job, and put him as acting DHS secretary. There are a lot of different choices Trump has, but they poise it as it's Chad Wolf, or you have one more controversy in the middle of a impeachment scandal in the middle of the economy, and you don't want to take on Senate Republicans.
So there's 2 tracks here. So there's going the acting track, which is you're limited who you can get as acting. It's got to be someone who is there. Now, again, with the controversy with Ken Cuccinelli, and this applies to Morgan as well, Mark Morgan, who's CBP commissioner, is that while certainly they've been there a lot more than 90 days before McAleenan's vacancy, but because McAleenan was really filling the vacancy of the confirmed DHS secretary who was Kirstjen Nielsen, they weren't there 90 days before her vacancy. So that's their reading, which is a valid reading of the statute. It might not be the only reading, but it certainly is valid. But as you and I both know, their motivation for that is not so much because they're a stickler for statute, because they're certainly not a stickler for the INA. It's because they don't want him. So fine. So here's my question to you. There's a couple of questions that I think that are very important, need to be vetted out here. There's the acting, kind of the robber in the middle of the night. You look like you want to skirt Senate confirmation. Why not go for the gold? In other words, why not? It's not a rush anyway. McAleenan, we're stuck with him and he's willing to stay longer anyway. Why not actually formally nominate it? Unfortunately, it's not going to be able to be Cuccinelli, But let me just throw out one name, and there's got to be a few more, and let me know if you have other ideas. A guy like Stephen McGraw, who's the current head of Texas Department of Public Safety. The guy is all law enforcement. He has an FBI background, so federal experience too. But he's not political. He's from Cornyn State, so I don't think he would oppose him. I have more confidence in Cuccinelli just because he's a political fighter. But I know McGraw, everyone tells me he has a war set mindset against the cartels instead of this namby-pamby law enforcement thing. Do you have any reservations about that?
I don't know him that well, so I can't sit there and say yes or no. I will say that Trump seems to want acting instead of permanent because he feels like he's been so burned by the permanent, it takes so long to fire them, get a new one, that I think that he would like a temporary because they have to perform. I mean, you have to remember, Mick Mulvaney does not need to be Senate confirmed to be the permanent chief of staff, and he has not been appointed.
I understand, but if he's going to be stuck with Chad Wolf, I mean, appoint a good guy. I mean,
I agree with you. Oh, I'm not saying Chad Wolf is the answer. I'm saying that there are other options if he wants to do, if he just wants to do acting, there are other options.
Okay, so let me throw out another thing here. I want to get your thoughts on it. Mark Morgan. Again, Mark's a straight as an arrow career law enforcement guy. We really need a political knife fighter, and that's Ken. But again, it's not going to happen. So why not? So we're saying Morgan has the same problem. He can't slide in as acting, but why not formally nominate Mark Morgan?
Well, this is the one silver lining that's happening right now. Mark Morgan will likely go to Senate confirmation for his current acting job. That is apparently what the breaking Wall Street Journal reported that. If he does get Senate confirmed, then, and if Chad Wolf does not work out, which he probably won't give it 6 months, then Mark Morgan can take over for DHS.
But why not do that immediately? Why?
I don't.
The Senate's not doing anything anyway. I'm saying if Trump said, look, I need a DHS secretary, you got to give it to me. And it's not, I mean, Morgan, the Democrats hate his guts, but the Republicans aren't going to object to him. There's nothing in his background because he's not political. Why not nominate him?
I don't know why he's not nominating him. I think his heart was set on Ken. I think his heart is still probably set on Ken.
Okay.
I'm not. Listen, I may not be giving you the answer that you like.
No, I know, but Ryan, but I'm speaking for my audience because I know they're going to ask me this. We passed the buck down on the swamp, but this is where some people get very frustrated. The president himself. I sympathize with him that you have a Senate Republican conference that's full of crap. And that makes it very hard because, you can't get people confirmed with 53. We have 53 votes and there's no filibuster on executive noms. And it's tough. I sympathize with him to a certain extent about the deep state and some of these people around him, although some of that is his fault. But at some point, how do we go from Trump wanting the best guy to oh, I guess you're right, Chad Wolf's the only guy? Come on. How does he agree to that?
Here's the thing, Dino. If Stephen Miller is sitting there and vouching for him that he is the only guy, and that's your guy on immigration.
But he knows Mark Morgan exists.
I understand, but I think, now this is my analysis, this is not what I've heard. I think that when the situation opened up, and there were obviously two clear right-wingers for the job, Mark Morgan and Ken Cuccinelli, I think that so much was pushed on Ken that Mark kind of faded to the background.
Sure.
And I just don't think that he was even considered. And at that point, everyone rallied around Chad Wolf, except for Ken. Ken rallied for himself, and Trump rallied for Ken. I don't know. I don't know then why Mark didn't step up again, but I do know the fact that there are people inside DHS. Okay, so this is a thing I've heard over the last 48 hours. Chad Wolf apparently has a list of people inside DHS that he would like to fire. They're all Trump people. Every Trump person is basically on that list. Wait a second. But I've also heard that Mark Morgan has a list of people that he particularly does not like. They are not Trump people, and they are also on that list. And I am sure that it's probably not a formal list, but it's probably people in his mind that he's vocally sat there and said, I do not like this person. And that I'm sure that the swamp around inside DHS or anyone close to the president have sat there. And because people on that list, or people who have been told that they are not liked by Mark Morgan, have told me that they're not liked by Mark Morgan, and they're people I'm not particularly fond of. But I'm sure that they are using any political power they have to make sure Mark Morgan's out there because they're fearing for their job. There's probably a lot of internal struggles that clearly we're not all aware of.
Yeah.
And I'm sure that if I heard that about Mark Morgan, there's other people at play. And also, if Stephen Miller's your guy and Stephen's saying, no, Chad Wolf is great. And apparently Chad did this big scene where he was like, I was a lobbyist, so I know how to stop a lobbyist. And he played the whole Trump line of I was a Democrat, so I know how to beat the Democrats.
Oh, geez.
Some nonsense like that. So I don't know exactly how they're lobbying him, but they are fighting tooth and nail. McConnell was whipping votes for Chad Wolf more than the White House was, because they are all hell bent on stopping Ken Cuccinelli.
But again, I mean, I think this is why it's so important for us to break the logjam by coming up with a third option, which I think Ken agrees with. I want to float one other idea.
Make it John Drozny.
No, for sure. I want to float one more idea before just closing up and bringing it to the punchline that I want to bring it to, and I think you'd be good at that. Okay, why don't we have anyone in the president's ear rectifying the immigration czar idea? In other words, give him power. Appoint, let's just say, Tom Homan, and the president tells Chad Wolf or whatever puke they slot in, look, you want to deal with, there's a lot of things. There's cyber, there's Coast Guard, there's Secret Service. You deal with that. But when it comes to immigration, at the end of the day, I am the president. I'm in charge, and I am saying what Homan says goes.
I don't think Stephen Miller would ever allow that to happen. I don't think Stephen Miller would ever allow an immigration czar who has actual power to even get inside the Trump world.
You're saying because essentially he's the immigration czar, so...
He is the immigration czar, and if anyone stepped in that position, it would be for them to take the blame when things go bad. When the travel ban was first erected and Stephen Miller screwed it up royally, the people that Miller blamed for that screwing up were other people from Sessions' office. His longtime allies took the fall for that. He has absolutely no qualms about stabbing somebody in the back for anything. So I would not recommend any person who's serious on the subject of immigration for ever taking the job of immigration czar, because you will get rewarded for nothing and blamed for everything, and it will be a position for you to take the fall for Stephen Miller and who's ever the acting or DHS secretary at that moment. The problem, a lot of it comes from Stephen. Stephen is essentially squashing a lot of Trump's abilities out of his personal ego. It's horrible to say because he is right on a lot of things and he is on the right side of a lot of things.
And Ryan, I think part of the problem is that Stephen probably suffers from what a lot of our base suffers from, which I want to bring this full circle to my football analogy. That in any given linear line, any measure, you could always find relative to under Obama, look, we got this, we implemented public charge, which is Ken Cuccinelli, large degree. But we've implemented things. But what bothers me about this soft bigotry of low expectations on the part of so many conservative figures that are always apologizing is, again, they're mistaking possession of the ball for a touchdown. So they're like, hey, Daniel, shut up. Stop complaining. Stop shouting orders. We're at the 30-yard line. We're at the 40-yard line. But I'm like, dude, but if you have the ball and you can get more, get it. I mean, stop it. Well, why? I mean, Daniel, do you want Democrats to win? Well, that's not the issue here. I mean, you have the ball. Make the plays. Let's get the best personnel and policies that we can get in the time that we have it. Let's utilize it. So I want to bring this to the punchline, the final point, which is this. We're at the cusp, based on your reporting and Politico is reporting it, of having Chad Wolf appointed as at least acting DHS secretary. What would you recommend people do at this very juncture, where a little bit of trained, concentrated fire on the president could influence a very important decision?
I think there's two things that you would have to sit there and do. I think that the base would have to rally around one person. It has to rally around one person. You can't have 50 people sitting there and saying different things because the president is very responsive. of his audience. And he's very responsive of his base. He is. And they read Twitter. I mean, that's what Daniel, whatever his name is, does all the time on Twitter. I can't remember his name. He's been in the administration forever, too. But anyway, so I think that that's one thing. And I think it's conducive of the base to not be an always Trumper. I mean, to sit there and say, I think always Trumpers are as destructive as never Trumpers are, because you allow him to get away with things.
They're stupid. The irony is when you throw principle under the bus for kissing Trump's rear end, you're actually hurting Trump, and often you're against him. So, I mean, this is, what I dealt with Jailbreak. They're like, Daniel, you're against the president. No, actually, you're against the president. And if everyone would speak up, you would give him backing. But if he sees no opposition and everyone's telling him this is the right and prudential thing to do, I mean, he'll follow it. So,
right.
I mean,
at his next rally, if he sits there and says we should have more legal immigrants in this country, the audience should say no. They should scream back, no, we should. And he would react immediately to that. Immediately. He would never say it again if this audience said no. If he felt like his base was leaving him, he would not whatsoever sit there and do that. So I think that at that point, you have to sit there and we have to have a solitary message about really draining the swamp. Trump believes, he said this not too many days ago, he said he really believes he's finally getting rid of the never Trumpers inside the administration. He really does believe that, unfortunately. And it's just not the case. And it's not the case because the people around him, since the beginning of his presidency, since Sean Spicer and Reince Priebus and Mercedes and Matt Schlapp ran up to him on his victory party after not doing anything for him, saying, congratulations, we were behind you 100%, and kissing the ring to get positions inside the administration. He has always been, the people who've been around him have always used him for their own personal gain. And that is the biggest tragedy. And I think that until the base sits there and says no to something and responds negatively to it, I don't think that he's going to have that reaction. When Trump supporters, including myself, burned our MAGA hats, when he was talking about a DACA amnesty, he walked away from it because he responds to his base.
And they're so stupid. I mean, I look, we've never had this influence before. McConnell and Ryan and McCarthy, they couldn't give a darn what you and I have to say. The good thing I've always said, and I've criticized Trump in a lot of things because I'm independent. I criticize Cruz. I criticize anyone when they veer off. We have to hold some sort of consistent vision. But the thing I've always said about Trump is the most positive attribute is he really cares about what conservatives think about him. But the problem is the conservative leadership is not conservative, or they're distracted, or they're focused on stupidity. They're focused on everything that doesn't matter or that they can't influence. And what scares me is, folks, after hearing this 45-minute presentation from Ryan, think about how you guys now, if you focus all on impeachment in the Democrat primary, think of how many things in every agency of every department on every critical fiscal social security issue is teetering 50-50. There's good guys that need close air support that are pushing good things. There's bad guys, inevitably more of them, pushing bad things. It's not a matter of, are you against Trump or for? No, it's a lot more complicated than that. And the best thing that's for the country, most importantly, but really also for Trump's own viability to be reelected and to accomplish good things and to really fulfill what I believe, there's maybe a couple issues I disagree with him on, but most things instinctively he's really with us on, is to actually pressure him. He needs to feel that. It's not like, Daniel, I actually think Chad Wolf was good because Trump should, no, stop being a rear end, be a leader. The problem is,
I think the thing that people confuse about people like myself and people like you to a certain degree is that they think that, because you say one negative thing about Trump, that you are insistently wanting him to fail. I undoubtedly want Trump to succeed. I want him to win a second term. I want him to be the most successful president in the history of our country. I am just pointing out these flaws that are stopping him from doing that. I would like Trump to accomplish every single principle he mapped out in his immigration platform when he ran for president. Every single one, I have an issue with none.
But if you already see him, even in his own rhetoric, much less the swamp around him, moving away. Like, for example, I mean, we had the big story this week, a record 67.3 million foreign language speakers in this country, and the trajectory is really, really growing. And this guy's out there saying, now we need more legal immigration across the board. I mean, that's a big problem, and that needs to be stopped before it grows legs. But I mean, I'm just telling you, Ryan, this is what so many of us have struggled with, that when a Democrat is president, you have an endless cadre of NGOs, of elected Democrats, elected liberals that focus on every office of every agency, of every department, every personnel choice, every policy, and they don't miss a beat. Yet we could have this and everyone's like, oh, we won. We just have to fight the Democrats. Well, no, the Democrats are in the administration. I mean,
right. And the problem was, when the day that Trump won, Reince Priebus had a long game, how he was going to have the RNC and all the people who hate Donald Trump take over his administration, and he succeeded. And he used Johnny DeStefano, and now they're using Sean Ducey to do it. And that has always been the problem that no one has ever talked about. And every single person on the cable news show who talks about politics and Trump, and they root for them 24 hours a day, who has failed to mention this, is problematic, because that is really the essential part. Personnel is policy.
Yep.
And the problem with Donald Trump is his personnel hates him and is working against him constantly. And Chad Wolf will do just the same as McAleenan did, as Nielsen did, and as Kelly did. And until he gets control of the DHS administration, an office he's never controlled at all during his presidency, it's just going to be a lot of the same.
There you have it, folks. Ryan Grudowski giving it over to us like no one else can. Again, he's coming out with a book in June. They Are Not Listening. It's going to be about the rise of nationalism, populism. Again, it's interesting perspective to read. Make sure to watch out for that when it becomes available for pre-order. Also, Ryan, where do we get your newsletter?
On my website, RyanGrudowski.com, and you click on the newsletter tab, and you click on it. It's a weekly newsletter about all the stories about national populism throughout the world.
Okay, RyanGrudowski.com. We will link to that in show notes. Look, we're going to have to make this a regular segment. Keep up your good reporting, your good work. Folks, we're out of time. Very productive week. Till next time, same place Monday. God bless y'all. Have a terrific weekend.